So what we have on our agenda today is 3 questions. And the first question I'll be answering is, what can we import and export from and to WLP format? Then we specifically talk about the meaning of 3 different import types. And the last question will be related to filters, dynamic filters in import and export feature, and how they can help you to import and export quicker and more effectively. So let's start with the first question. What can we import and export to from WLP format? Well, before I answer that question, you probably will ask what means import and export and what means WLP format. The whole name of that webinar may sound a little bit foreign for those users who are just starting to work with Vialon, so I'd like to explain it in a simple way. Basically, import and export feature is the feature that allows you to copy different settings on the platform. Okay, this is a very simple definition, and you can learn more about it during that webinar. And I'm sure once we start talking about import export, it becomes even more easier to understand why we call it import and export, why we're not saying just copy. And then what is WLP format? WLP is a special Vialon platform format that was designed by us, and we allow you to save different settings of items on the platform in that format. Okay, so again, WLP stands for Vialon platform, and it's just a special format of file. So what exactly we can import and export to WLP format from WLP format? Here are the answers. You can import and export unit properties. You can import and export resource content. And you can do the same thing with user settings / properties. So unit, resource, and user. And I'm sure most of you have a specific question about resource, but keep it a little bit for yourself, and I'll explain specifically about resource content soon. So unit properties. You usually import, export, or copy the unit properties from one specific unit to multiple others. Even so, of course, you can copy it from one unit to another unit, just it's up to you. What specifically you can import and export or copy? Here on the bottom page, you see unit properties dialog that allows you to set up one specific unit. And you see different tabs. As you may notice, 2 tabs are crossed out because you can't copy via import export. You can't copy access to the unit, and you can copy the belonging of the unit to specific unit groups. But all other tabs are stayed here, and this is because you can certainly copy those properties. So any properties in general tab, icon, advanced settings, sensors, custom fields, commands, eco driving, profile, trip detection, fuel consumption, and service intervals can be copied from one unit to multiple others. No need to set up each unit individually, and this is the most important meaning and value of import-export feature. Okay, so we were talking about unit properties. Now, next slide. Again, I want to demonstrate you the unit properties of one of our demo units, and pay your attention to the sensors tab. This is most likely their most popular property that is being imported and then exported from one unit to multiple others. And what is important to keep in mind that sensor setup is specific for each device type. So when you do the import export, you need to keep in mind that you need to do it from units that have the same device type. Okay, the same relates to commands, but again, sensors are the most popular, so I want to specifically pay your attention to the sensors. Now, here we see the expert to dial WLP dialog, where you decide which options or which properties you want to export. And again, you see the same tabs that I just showed you in the unit properties dialog. Okay. So sometimes one tab is broken into multiple different options. For example, general properties belong to general tab, device configuration also counters. So these three features, they all belong to general tab of the unit properties. But they are broken here into three different pieces because sometimes you want to copy the counters information, but you don't want to copy the general properties such as name of the device, device type, unique ID, and you don't want to copy certain device configuration settings. Okay, so right now you have some theoretical information about what you can copy from one unit to another, but later I will show you, demonstrate you how you actually can copy it. So we'll also look together at this interface right on the platform. However, I'd like to tell you more about the resource content and how the resource content can be imported and exported from one resource to multiple other resources. So for example, we have a demo resource and we want to export the certain resource content to multiple other resources that belong to your clients. What we see here is different options that you can export, import. And here, I'd like to pay your attention that you can import, export only those options, only those items that belong to the resource. In general, what is the definition of resource? Resource is the content. Resource content is geofences, jobs, notifications, drivers, trailers, sorry, reports, and I don't want to miss anything. So on the bottom of my screen, you see again all the items that belong to the resource: reports, geofences, drivers, trailers, passengers, jobs, and notifications. Here on this screenshot in the middle of the screen, you see only those options that belong to one specific demo resource. So not every resource may have, for example, passengers information. No one created any demo passengers on it. That's why we don't see it in this dialog. Okay. And basically, resource is the storage for those drivers that belong to that specific demo client. Your client 1, 2, 3, and 4 will have their own drivers, but sometimes they need to have their demo drivers that you created for them, and this is why you sometimes want to copy those drivers for your clients. So just to demonstrate them how they look. Now, regarding their users settings and properties. Again, we are looking into some standard user settings that belong to the demo users, and we want to copy or import, export the settings to client 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is what our import export feature allows you to do. And here I'd like you to pay your attention that what you can copy here, it's not just the user settings, which I hope look familiar to you, like language, time zone, daylight saving time, date format, and many, many others, including those ones that you can find on Maps tab on the left panel. But besides these user settings, you also can copy user properties. Okay, so with user properties, you see you can copy some general rights that are located in the general tab, like ability to create items, unit groups, units, and users, then custom fields. So this is also the part of those options that you can copy from one user to another. And the third part of those options are also located on the monitoring tab. So whatever icons you decide to make visible on this working list panel on the left side, those items can also be copied from one user to another. So by default, each user have, for example, 5 of these little icons. But here you set up one user and then you copy this, their settings from demo user to multiple others. It's also related to the stop panel where you see only one tab right now, monitoring tab, but you can add multiple others, and that will be also the part of the settings that you're copying from one user to multiple others. Even this dialog that you can see right now is open because I clicked on the unit icon. Even that setup will be copied. So if you open it for one of your unit and all of these users also have that unit located on the work list, it's this dialog with all the sensors information and the address, it all will look absolutely the same. Plus the same relates to the map layer that you've chosen right here from available maps. So all other users will have the same map layer visible. So let's get from the theory to the practice. And let me open the demo account. Okay. And show you how we can import, export the unit settings, resource content, and then their user settings. So we start with the unit, and in order to open import export dialog, you need to click on the top right corner on the name of the user. So my user is called import export. In your case, it will be some other name. You click on it, and then you see the dialog import export. And if you like to copy the settings from one unit to another, you're first exporting those settings. Okay, so you need to select export to WLP option. Okay, so you opened that dialog and you need to find the unit from which you'd like to export the settings. We'll talk about the filters later, but here what I'm doing, I'm finding that unit. Okay, I found it. And here I select those settings that I'd like to copy. I can copy absolutely all settings by clicking Control-click. I select all the settings. I'd like to unselect them and decide to copy only sensors. Why I would like to copy only settings? Well, I actually can copy everything except general settings, but I'll be experimenting with sensors only right now. Be very careful with general properties. General properties contain the name of the unit, the unique ID of the unit, and this is the setting that may cause the problem, because imagine you're copying the settings from one of your unit to multiple others. All of them will have the same unique ID, and that is not allowed to, by our system. So basically their unique ID will be risen. All of them will have the same name, which will be very confusing later. And of course, everything can be fixed, but just usually in 99% of cases, you do not copy their general properties, okay? Then if you want to save these settings in the file, you just click OK and you save the settings in the file. If you want to copy these settings to another unit, you select the option item. You selected the item option and you see what happened? It said OK before. When I select the file, it says OK, so if I click it, it will be saved in the file. If I click item, there is no OK button anymore, there is a next button. If I click on this next button, I automatically switch to import from WLP option. So now I have a virtual file with my sensors and I'm importing those settings to other units within the system. However, I got this pop-up notification and I want to specify that the settings of unit, resource, or users can be imported and exported only if they belong to the same metric system. Some units to which I have access to belong to some other measurement system, and this is what this notification is saying. So 7 items were filtered from the list, okay, and they were filtered from there because they have a different measurement system. Now I can select another unit which surely doesn't have any sensors at this moment, okay? And if I click OK, this food truck 1 will have the same sensors as Phoenix food truck had before. To make it very clear, let me close it and then I will repeat all the steps again, but to make it very clear, I would like to show you this unit. I'm sorry, on the units tab. So here is this food truck 1, which doesn't have any sensors right now. So I open its unit properties, I go to sensors, nothing is here. And Phoenix food truck has all the sensors. So now let me repeat all the steps and you'll see how magic happens. So we open user settings, import, export, export to WLP, find the unit, select sensors, switch to the item, click next, click OK, find the destination unit, which is food truck 1, click OK, go to the unit properties of food truck 1, open the sensors, and we see the same sensors for food truck 1. So we successfully exported the unit properties. Now let me show you what we can do with the resource content. So we open the same dialog, and the first step is to select another option on the very first menu. So by default, it will always says unit, but you can switch it to resource to work with the resource content. And here you decide from which resource you want to make a copy. So for example, I select Demo USA resource, okay? And I see all the content that belongs to that resource, including geofences, jobs, notifications, drivers, trailers, passengers, and report templates. Okay. Now, I also want to demonstrate you that I have another resource here, which is called Import Export resource. And this resource has geofences and reports only. And as you can see, there are just 2 geofences and 1 report template. So my task is to copy the reports and geofences that belong to Demo USA. Okay. So all reports and all the geofences, and I will be copying them to import export resource. So since I don't want to save them in the file, I switch the option from file to item, and I click next. Again, 3 of my resources have a different measurement system, so they will be filtered from the list. And this is okay because I definitely know that my import export resource belongs to the same metric system. So I select that resource and I click OK. It's very important to keep in mind that I'm, as a user import expert, have access to multiple resources. In the same way I had access to multiple different units, right? So what I want to tell you is that when you're doing import-export from unit to unit, from resource to resource, or even from user to user, you can work only those units, resources, and users to which you have access to, which makes sense, right? So if you have access to import-export resource, then you can copy the reports to it. If you have access to Demo USA resource, then you can copy the reports from it to import-export, right? So I have access to both Demo USA resource and to import-export resource. And here, using the filter on the right side from New button, so I'm in the Reports tab, on the right side from New button, I have the filter. I can see which reports belong to Demo USA and which reports belong to import-export. As you can see, these are the same reports. Now let me demonstrate how to import-export the user settings. This task is probably the most interesting because you will see a huge change of the user settings before and after. In order to demonstrate it to you, I will create another user import-export demo 111. Give it a password, okay, and even give it the access to a couple of units. Now, once I did it, I also want to show you how their settings of that user look right now and allow you to compare how the user settings of that user will look when we do the import-export. So this user right now has a default settings, so import-export demo 111. We'll log in as this user to see what his platform looks like. As you can see, the map is centered on Eastern Europe. There are multiple tabs on the top menu. It looks pretty bulky. And yes, there are some units that we can add. Sorry, let's click all. But nothing is set up the way we want. All these icons are not set up the way we want. Even the map layer probably is selected just in some, by default, will be always custom maps. Now let's get back to import-export user. And let's export the settings of import-export user to this demo 111 user. We will be exporting absolutely all settings, including even the map layer. So I'll change the map layer right now, and I open the extended, well, let's do it without extended menu. So let's open import-export, export to WLP, okay? And then we select the user. And our user is named import-export. We decide to make a complete copy. Complete copy includes all the settings, all the possible options. The one I showed you earlier on the presentation. So it includes user settings, user properties, and even this little work list adjustments and top menu adjustments that we also covered, right? So even the steps will look the same. Now we switch to the item because we want to copy it to other user. And we click next. As usual, some items, some users get filtered because they have different measurement system. And now we can search for our specific user. Select it, click OK. Okay, now let's go to the users and log in as this user to see the difference, to see the result of our import-export process. So what we can see is that map is centered on the US. We also see that the icons on the work list changed. The tabs look absolutely the same as for import-export user. And also, if we open user settings, we'll see that these particular settings look the same, as well as the maps selection looks the same. And here we see the Google Trips is selected. So all these different settings can be exported, imported, exported, and this should help you a lot with the setup of new users, new accounts, and new units. I'd like to get back to the presentation and give you a little bit more information about specific features that I'd like you to use and be aware how to use. So there are 3 different import types. Remember that second part when we decide what we want to export, and then we need to import these sensors or import this unit settings or resource content. At that moment, when we are ready to import the unit settings or resource content, we need to decide how we want to do it. We either can replace, merge, or append. By default, we will merge, but let's look at all 3 options from top to the bottom. So if you decide to replace the sensors of one unit to others, then it says data will be replaced completely. That means that whatever sensors other units had before, they won't have it anymore, and they will have only those sensors that belong to your, let's say, demo unit. So you decide to export the sensors from demo unit, you're raising all the sensors of other units, and you are adding only those ones that belong to demo. Now, this is not a very popular option for using, because usually you just want to add a particular sensor or edit a particular sensor. And this is why by default we're using the merge option. And the merge option means that item with the same name will be replaced and the new items will be added. So imagine you have RPM sensor in the demo unit and RPM sensor in all units of the same type. And you just decide that you selected the wrong parameter or some other wrong settings, or maybe the type of that sensor is wrong, and you fix it for your demo units. So you select the right type of sensor, and then you want to use import export to edit all other sensors with the same name. So in this case, merge will work perfect way, because the sensors will not be duplicated, they will be just merged. It will be the same RPM sensor, but just the type of the sensor will be fixed for all of your other units. And then the third option, append, says items with the same name will be left intact and the new ones will be added. I find that option less popular, because imagine the situation when you already have the sensor with name engine coolant or mileage, and then by some reason you want to copy the mileage sensor from one unit to all others, and you want it to be added. So if other units already have mileage sensor, they will have 2 of them. They will have mileage sensor and another mileage sensor, the one that you are copying. So this situation is unlikely to happen, but still there are certain situations when you will be willing to add 2 sensors to this with the same name, to have 2 sensors with the same name in unit properties. Now, I'd like also to tell you how can dynamic filter help using import and export feature. And this is a pretty easy question, because you already saw how I was using the filter by name. But here I'd like to pay your special attention that this is not the only filter that you can use to find a specific unit. We also have filters by account, by unique ID, by phone number, by device type and unit group, and many others that you can see right here. The most popular ones are by device type and unit group, especially when you import those sensors feel free to use the device type filter and find only, for example, clamp, the crackling, and only those units that belong to that specific device type with which you're working, because we just talked that sensors are specific for a certain device type, and if you're copying those sensors from one device type, you can't use the units that belong to the other device type. So please feel free to use these dynamic filters, not only for units, but also for users and resources. Their dynamic filters are very, very helpful. Thank you for your attention, and I'm pretty sure you asked some questions here. Most of your questions, okay, not that many questions. I still hope there will be more questions asked. And even if you don't have these questions now, feel free to contact me later or ask them on the forum. It will be my pleasure to answer. And thank you so much for your attention. Have a nice day.